you for setting this up.
My pleasure. All
All
right,
right.
so yeah, Melissa and Dani, we'll just go ahead and let you guys start really quickly, just to kind of give us an overview of what you've been seeing and what your clients have been bringing to your attention through the COVID-19 crisis.
Sure. Well, I'll start. The main thing that we are letting our clients know is that don't stress about health insurance right now. There's so many options to get health insurance right now if you don't currently have it, or if you're an employer struggling to determine whether or not you can continue coverage during furloughs or temporary layoffs. There's so many options, and the carriers are being very accommodating due to these special circumstances. A lot of the employers are doing, or excuse me, the insurance carriers are doing special enrollments. If anyone's been laid off, the Nevada Health Link is doing a special open enrollment through May 15th, so you can get coverage through that. If you have questions about your coverage, or if your spouse, if you're on your spouse's plan and you recently lost coverage, talk to your employer, talk to your insurance broker, because there's opportunities to enroll right now due to everything going on. Also, the health insurance plans are required to cover COVID testing at no charge. That was part of the CARES Act that was passed a few weeks ago, last month. And, so there's no cost sharing for that, even if you're at an out-of-network facility. So don't stress. Go get testing done. They're doing that at the Reno Livestock Event Center 4 days a week. Certainly go have those tests done if you're having symptoms. And don't worry about, the cost for doing that. Also, there's a lot of great resources out there. Obviously, like I said, talk to your HR professional, talk to your employer, talk to your insurance broker. But for employers out there, there's some great resources on the Department of Labor's website, as well as the CDC's website and the IRS website. There's some Q&A pages that are very helpful. So just want to make sure and point that out. And then Dani, did you have some tips?
Yeah, so right now we're experiencing unprecedented things through this pandemic, but it doesn't mean that HR rules or regulations go out the window. It's very important to keep all health information that an employer receives through this highly confidential. Employers can open themselves up to cases of discrimination as it relates to ADA and ADEA if confidential information is being shared. So we want to avoid that. And only when there's a legitimate need to share this information with public health authorities like the CDC, covered entities can provide that information. And in addition, secondly, on my perspective of what I've seen, communication is very key. For those people working from home or not working at all, they kind of get a little stressed out not knowing what's going on. You want to keep them engaged and informed. So when employees are working from home or not working at all, it could be hard for them as well as for you keeping everything in order. So it'd be essential to try to put together something like group teleconferencing meetings, conference calls, or even setting up a social media page where you can share information with all of your employees to keep them communicated with what's going on at the workplace while they're waiting to come back to work.
Nice. All right. Thank you both for that introduction. We've got so many great questions that came in from your clients, but also some from our chamber members as well. So we'll just go ahead and jump right into those. I think first, just a baseline question, because we've seen and we get tons of calls and emails daily, even still, about how people are trying to navigate the differences between furloughing their employees and laying off their employees. So could you guys briefly, as a baseline, give us quick definitions of those terms, legal definitions for those terms, so that everyone's on the same page?
Yeah, absolutely. So oftentimes these kinds of phrases can be interchanged or used interchangeably, may not necessarily be used in the correct way. So with regards to a furlough, when an employer furloughs its employees, it requires employees to work fewer hours or to take certain amounts of unpaid time off of work. You can furlough your employer or your non-exempt employees a day a week for the remainder of the year, having them work 32 hours instead of 40, or you can have them take chunks of time, a week, 2 weeks off, again, going unpaid. Generally, the theory behind furloughing is to have a majority of the employees share some of the hardship across everyone. So it's not just targeting one or two specific type employees, right? Or having employees lose their jobs completely. Employees who are furloughed are technically still employees of the business. This allows them to retain their employee benefit rights, especially to healthcare insurance. And employers often decide to furlough rather than lay off because going through the hiring, firing, onboarding can be more costly than just having them furlough for a little bit. With regards to a layoff, this occurs when employers terminate their employees for reasons other than their performance, right? So things in situations where an employee or employer can no longer afford their employees, there's just no work for them to do, there's a slowdown in business, or any other economic reason. Layoffs can be both permanent and temporary. With a temporary layoff, this is kind of where we get into that interchangeable phrasing, right? But with a layoff, it's an actual separation from payroll type concept. So with the temporary layoff, the employer believes that conditions will change and they'll bring those employees back, versus the more permanent layoff, employers tend to have an expectation that they're not going to come back. So under either circumstances, employers are uncertain if they're returning, or employees are uncertain they're returning to work. And because of this potential, employers are required and should pay any final pay, including any accrued PTO based on the company's policy and things of that like, per the Nevada revised statute, with either that being that last day or within 3 days. But they don't have any expectation to come back to work. This also allows them to find other employment. Unfortunately, right now, that's a little tricky. Right. But those are the main differences between furlough.
Gotcha. So I know a lot of businesses, especially in our chamber community, have made the determinations as to whether or not to furlough or to lay off their employees based on Governor Sisolak's stay-at-home order, which, at least for now, goes through the end of this month. Now, let's say, for the sake of argument, that the stay-at-home order gets extended past April 30th. At what point does an employer need to, what kinds of factors need to be considered when an employer is thinking through whether to continue to furlough, or to just lay off their employees?
Right. And that's a big thing to consider. Ultimately, the decision comes to what the employer can and can't afford with regards to what they believe is best for the company and their employee. To keep someone furloughed, it obviously costs money to the employer to keep them on their benefit plans if they want to extend that as an offering to keep them engaged, right, recall back to work. That being said, employers can, they have all of the rights to determine the length and the terms of the furlough, the reduced hours, whether that's they're going to work a couple days a week or no days a week, and how long that should last. They also determine maintaining those benefits for the employee. So they essentially would have to look at how they can continue to operate and maintain these things with little to no revenue based on whether or not they're still operating. The best part about this is obviously an employer feels for their employee. Do I want to keep them on? I don't want them to have to suffer through this. It helps them, right? But at the same time, under the new CARES legislation, any employee impacted by COVID-19 is eligible for unemployment compensation. That's both furloughed and laid off employees. So that can help rest assure the employer on what they feel is best to do for their employee. But again, you're going to go back to looking at that cost savings. Is it good to just cut everything off now, reopen in a good standing? Is it better to maintain things going on as they are, continue to pay those little things out and they come back with a more difficult reopening? It just ultimately depends on what's best for both the company and the employees. But the employees do have that coverage under CARES Act.
Right, right. So
and Christine, sorry to add to that, as I said earlier, the insurance carriers are being very accommodating during this time, and they've relaxed the actively at work hourly requirements. And so if, the employer is able to keep them on benefits, they can continue to do so even though they're not meeting the normal 30-hour per week requirement. Or if they do have to remove them from insurance, a lot of the carriers are allowing them to come back on the insurance after they're rehired without having to resatisfy the 60-day or normal 30-day waiting period for benefits. And most carriers are doing that through either June 30th, as long as they're hired back before June 30th, or Anthem, I know, is going all the way until July 31st.
That's great. And that actually leads really well into the next question, which has to do with federal assistance for employers right now. So if an employer is not currently offering health insurance benefits, is there any kind of federal assistance being offered right now in order to help employers provide that to their employees if they still have people on their payroll?
Sure, there's nothing specific, but obviously if a business is lucky enough to actually get the SBA loans that the money's run out, but if there's another round and a business is able to qualify and get that money, they can use that money for putting together a health benefits program.
Nice. So shifting a little bit to the CARES Act now. So the CARES Act has allotted employees with a great deal more options for paid leave. Now, how does this impact workplace policy, and how should employers think about adapting their current workplace policies in order to accommodate that new legislation?
Yeah, so most of the time off, the additional time off pieces are coming under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It requires certain employers to provide employees with paid sick leave or expanded family medical leave for specified reasons related to COVID-19. So the Department of Labor, the Wage and Hour Division, administers and enforces these laws, and they are temporary and expected to go through December 31st of 2020. So under this act, there are 3 additional paid leave types: 2 weeks of paid sick leave at an employee's regular rate of pay for up to 2 weeks if that person is unable to work because they've been quarantined or experiencing COVID symptoms and seeking medical diagnosis. There's 2 weeks or 80 hours of paid sick leave at 2/3 an employee's regular rate of pay because they're unable to work because they need to care for a child or another individual that may be under quarantine. Or where a child's care provider has closed due to reasons under COVID-19. And then we have the additional 10 weeks of paid expanded family medical leave at 2/3 the employee's regular rate of pay, where the employee can take additional time off. Covered employers include all businesses, well, most businesses with fewer than 500 employees. Small businesses with fewer than 50 can qualify for an exemption under this if they show that the person going on leave would jeopardize the viability of the business. All employees, so for eligible employees, are eligible for these 2 weeks of paid sick time, again, as it relates to COVID-19. So with regards to adapting policies, it's important that employers understand that this is required. You can't force an employee to use any accrued sick time, PTO time, vacation time that they already had in the bank before you pay this out. This piece is required. And under this law, this legislation, it's a dollar for dollar exchange that you do through submitting your payroll, your taxes for the Medicare and the Social Security. You get reimbursed in that way to pay for the sick leave if you can't otherwise afford it. So that being said, it should be paid first. Employees can elect to decide to utilize their other options, their accrued time, if they're covered under the 2/3 aspects of both these pieces of the law. So if they want to supplement the rest of their income, instead of getting that 2/3, they can utilize their paid time off to get the full amount they normally would get. But it's important that employers know that they got to push that first. They got to pay that first. They can't require, of course, an employee to change it otherwise. So,
Got it.
Yep.
Alrighty, thank you. So we've probably got enough time for one or two more prepared questions, and then I want to open up the lines for any participant to go ahead and ask you guys whatever questions are on their mind, or whatever may have come to mind as they heard you guys address some of these prepared questions. So now, God forbid, an employee contracts COVID-19 and has had close contact with other employees at your business. What is your responsibility as an employer? One, to report that to your other employees, to report the contact that your employees may have had with someone who is contagious. And what are the protocols after that happens? How do you determine who to send on sick leave, who should go into quarantine? How should an employer navigate those waters?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you get a positive diagnosis within the workplace, it's obviously imperative that you want to keep all your employees safe. That doesn't mean just the ones that are around them, but you want to make sure everyone's safe. So obviously doing some investigating, find out where that employee's been, how long it's been, who they've interacted with, are key pieces. Of course, first and foremost, that employee is feeling sick or has something going on, they should not be on site. And if they are, send them home immediately. For those who've been around that employee or have potential exposure, you should notify them right away. Of course, keeping in mind, going back to all, protected rights for employees, you're not going to name that employee, so-and-so, John Doe has it, you need to do X, Y, Z. So you want to protect the privacy of that diagnosed employee. But you want to make sure that those who have been exposed have the knowledge and that they can then do what they feel is necessary. So the CDC actually released an algorithm, kind of flow chart to follow for employers. They can ask the questions: have they been exposed? Have they not? If they have, then this. If not, then this. And it's definitely something I can send to you if you want to distribute it out to anybody who's interested in having that piece of information. It's a good flow chart to follow. Of course, in these trying times, things are changing all the time, but it is the most updated one that's out there. So it's good to have. With regards to notifying any sort of state or local health authorities, you do so based on, and most of the interactions or information that I've heard from clients, it's more of they've reached out to the employer and now they're notifying you that this has happened versus the other way. But it's also good to report that. And as I mentioned earlier, those covered employers can share that information with those health authorities. And then just going forward, if the case is diagnosed inside the workplace, detailed cleaning, going through that whole process to ensure cleanliness in the workplace, everyone's taken care of, returning them back to work, having the procedure to return them back to work are all important factors in deciding what needs to happen. But again, it's a case-by-case basis. If it's someone with just a cough due to allergies, you may not want to necessarily overreact, but it's better to do so sometimes because you don't know what's happening. So
right. Thank you so much for that. So we've still got a couple minutes left. So I think rather than unmuting everyone, what I'll do is I will bank on the participants who are with us right now to unmute themselves if they have a question for Melissa or Dani. So I'm inviting everybody to do that now. If you have a question, go and unmute yourself and ask away.
And Christine, just one thing I want to mention to kind of just dovetail on Dani's comments about cleaning your workplace if you do have a positive case. The CDC website has tips on what you can do to thoroughly clean the workspace. So definitely check that out if you're not sure what to do after a positive test.
That's awesome. And that is certainly going to be our new reality in every sector of the economy is, figuring out ways to navigate those new cleaning procedures, making sure that, our employees and also consumers can have confidence that our businesses are ready to go and safe to return to. So that's awesome. All right, any questions out there?
If not, there's one thing too I wanted to mention is that, telemedicine is another benefit that's covered on most health plans, and that's something that is now covered at no charge. Even for plans that are HSA qualified, typically in the past there has to be a charge on those plans for telemedicine. Currently there's not, and that goes through the end of the year. So, definitely, be sure that you're using that telemedicine feature on your plan, because it's free and it's a great way to pre-screen before you rush down to get tested. And then also with the CARES Act, in the event, hopefully soon, when they have a vaccination available for COVID, that will also be covered at no charge. The carriers have 15 days to make it no charge, and it'll fall under the ACA preventative no charge, vaccinations. So hopefully we'll have that soon.
Awesome. That's great to hear.
Mm-hmm.
What I might do is I might just unmute everyone, and if you want to remute yourself, please be invited to. I just want to make sure everyone has the ability to ask whatever question they want right now. So firing away, unmuting all.
No.
Any questions out there?
You couldn't have had it any better than.
I just sent in a question via chat to see if you wouldn't mind sending out the CDC algorithm for COVID.
Writing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I only saw the one for the flu.
Awesome. Yes. And in case anyone had a hard time hearing that question, it was, would you mind sending out the CDC algorithm for COVID? I only see the one for the flu. So that's a good question right there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I can get that over to you in an email, and you can distribute how best that'll work for everyone.
Perfect. Yes. All right. Any other questions out there?
Sorry, one more thing too that I can point out that was new with this new legislation is that for members that do have health savings accounts or flexible spending accounts, over-the-counter medicines, you can use your HSA funds or your FSA funds to purchase over-the-counter medicine without a prescription. That's a new rule. It repealed the ACA mandate that said over-the-counter medicine could not be used for those or was not an eligible expense for those funds. But that is now changed and reverted back to January 1st. So that's good news there. So you can start using your HSA funds for things like Tylenol and allergy medicine.
Awesome. That is incredibly helpful. All right. Any other questions out there, anyone? All right. Well, folks, I think that's all she wrote. Melissa or Dani, do you have any final thoughts as we send everyone off?
No, just like I said, there's great resources online. Talk to your broker, talk to, your employer or your HR representative. There's lots of resources out there, so don't stress. And I hope everyone stays safe and keeps your sanity.
Absolutely. That is definitely the name of the game at this point. All right. Well, I thank you again, Melissa and Dani, for joining us and for offering your expertise to our members. And I thank you for the more than 30 people who hopped on this call. So thanks for taking the time, and we will get you in touch with those resources. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.